The missing mile of San Francisco Canyon. If you drive 30 miles north of Los Angeles, past the suburban sprawl of Santa Clarita, the terrain undergoes an abrupt, violent transformation. The strip malls and stucco housing developments give way to the Sierra Pelona Mountains, a jagged, arid landscape of crumbling shale and dense, choking chaparral. Cutting through the heart of this terrain is San Francisco Canyon Road. To the casual commuter or the weekend motorcyclist, it looks like any other mountainous secondary highway in Southern California, a twisting ribbon of gray asphalt flanked by sheer rock walls on one side and steep drops into a dry creek bed on the other. But if you talk to the tow truck drivers in Newhall, or the Caltrans maintenance crews who service District 7, they will tell you about the missing mile. Officially, the road is continuous. Map applications show a seamless route connecting the city to the high desert. But there is a specific, 3-minute stretch of asphalt, roughly between post miles 10.4 and 11.8, where the rules of the road, and perhaps something more fundamental, simply cease to apply. The geography of a disaster. To understand why San Francisco Canyon Road feels wrong, one must understand what happened there on the night of March 12, 1928. At exactly 11:57 p.m., the St. Francis Dam, a massive concrete gravity dam built by the Los Angeles Bureau of Water Works and Supply, collapsed catastrophically. A towering wall of water, nearly 140 feet high, roared down the canyon at 18 miles per hour. It carried with it thousands of tons of concrete, pulverized boulders, and entire groves of oak trees. More than 400 people were swept away in the darkness, their bodies carried all the way to the Pacific Ocean. The canyon was scraped clean down to the bedrock. When the county rebuilt the road in the 1930s, they laid the new asphalt directly over the scar tissue of the flood. In some places, the roadbed sits mere feet above the unmarked, silt-covered graves of those who were never recovered. The haunting of San Francisco Canyon doesn't manifest with floating sheets or rattling chains. It manifests through the modern infrastructure meant to keep drivers safe: your dashboard, your headlights, and your brakes. Case file: the testimony of Marcus Vance. Marcus Vance is not a man given to flights of fancy. A veteran field supervisor for a commercial logistics firm, Marcus spent 15 years driving heavy freight and hotshot delivery rigs across the American Southwest. He knows how fatigue affects the brain, and he knows how the desert heat can create illusions on the asphalt. On October 14, 2024, Marcus was driving a late-model Ford F-250 utility truck down from Lancaster, taking San Francisco Canyon Road to avoid a major bottleneck on the Interstate 5 southbound. It was roughly 1:15 a.m. The first thing that goes is always the radio, Marcus later recalled during an informal interview. I had a sports talk show playing on AM 570 out of LA, clear as a bell. Then, right around the old power plant station, the audio didn't just go to static, it compressed. It sounded like the host was speaking underwater, his voice stretching out and slowing down until it was just a low, rhythmic thumping. Marcus reached out to turn the volume dial, but before his fingers touched the plastic, his headlights began to dim. I figured my alternator was shot, Marcus said. I started rolling to a stop on the shoulder. But when I pressed the brake pedal, the truck didn't slow down. The pedal was completely stiff, like there was a block of wood wedged beneath it. And that's when I noticed the odometer. The digital trip computer on the Ford's dashboard was glitching. The numbers weren't rolling over. They were cycling rapidly backward and forward between the same 3 digits, 283. Over and over. 283, 283, 283. Then came the wait. Marcus described a sensation of sudden, immense atmospheric pressure dropping over the truck, as if the vehicle had dipped beneath the surface of a deep pool of water. The cabin air turned instantly cold, not the dry, crisp cold of a California mountain night, but a heavy, damp, suffocating chill that smelled intensely of river mud and rotting vegetation. Through the dim, yellowed glow of his failing headlights, Marcus saw the asphalt ahead begin to shimmer. There was no water on the road, Marcus emphasized, his voice dropping an octave. It hadn't rained in Santa Clarita for 3 months. But the road looked wet. It looked slick and black, reflecting light that wasn't there. And then I heard the scratching. It started at the rear bumper, the distinct, sharp sound of dozens of fingernails clawing against the metallic tailgate of the truck. The scratching migrated rapidly along the side panels, moving toward the cab. Marcus locked his doors, his breath forming thick, white plumes in the sudden interior freeze. He looked out the passenger side window. The canyon walls were gone, swallowed by a dense, unnatural mist that seemed to rise directly out of the asphalt. Peering through the fog were shapes. They weren't distinct human figures, but rather pale, undulating columns of white and gray, shifting with an erratic, jerking motion that looked like bodies tumbling through a violent current. Marcus closed his eyes, slammed his foot onto the stiff accelerator, and prayed. For 30 seconds, the engine roared, but the truck felt as though it were pulling a massive, invisible anchor through wet cement. Then, with a sudden pop that rattled Marcus's jaw, the pressure vanished. The headlights flared back to their blinding white brilliance. The radio blasted to life with a jolt of loud static before snapping back to the sports broadcast. The truck surged forward, tires screeching against dry, dusty asphalt. Marcus looked at his clock. It was 1:18 a.m. He had covered less than half a mile, but to his body, it felt like an eternity. He refused to look in his rearview mirror until he hit the bright, neon-lit safety of the Chevron station on Bouquet Canyon Road. The Caltrans records. If Marcus Vance's experience was an isolated incident, it could be dismissed as a micro-sleep episode or a temporary neurological anomaly brought on by highway hypnosis. But the archives of the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, contain a quiet, perplexing history of the canyon. Between 1998 and 2018, there were no fewer than 14 documented cases of vehicles veering off the road along the exact same 3-mile radius of San Francisco Canyon, under identical weather conditions. The most disturbing pattern in these files is the consistency of the mechanical failures. In nearly 80% of the nighttime accidents reported on this stretch, mechanics later inspected the wreckage only to find the brake lines completely intact, the alternators functional, and the electrical systems devoid of shorts. By all physical metrics, the vehicles should have worked perfectly. Yet, on the road, they died. The mystery of the white flashes. Local emergency responders who frequent the canyon have their own names for the phenomena. Among paramedics and California Highway Patrol, CHP, officers stationed out of the Newhall substation, the area is occasionally referred to as the Washington. One retired CHP officer, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, detailed an experience he had while responding to a solo vehicle spinout in June of 2021. It was around 3 in the morning, right after a heavy marine layer had pushed into the valleys, the former officer stated. I was parked on the shoulder with my emergency lights flashing, waiting for the flatbed tow truck to arrive. The driver of the crashed car was sitting in the back of my cruiser, totally silent, just staring at his hands. The officer stepped out of his patrol car to stretch his legs. The night was dead quiet, save for the hum of his vehicle's idling engine. As he looked down toward the dry creek bed, the site where the historic St. Francis Dam town site had once stood, he saw a flash of white light. I thought it was a hiker with a headlamp at first, he said. Which would be weird enough out there at that hour. But then another light flashed 50 yards to the left. Then another. Within 2 minutes, the entire canyon floor was pulsing with these small, faint white flashes. It looked like hundreds of camera flashes going off simultaneously under a thick blanket of gray wool. The officer drew his flashlight and shone it down into the brush. The moment the beam hit the creek bed, the flashes stopped. But as he swung the beam back toward the road, he caught something in the reflection of his patrol car's red and blue strobe lights. The rear window of his cruiser was covered in condensation from the damp night air. Slapped against the cold glass, from the outside, were dozens of distinct, small handprints. They were too small to belong to an adult. They were the size of children's hands, their palms pressed flat against the glass as if trying to push their way inside the vehicle. I didn't say a word to the guy in the back seat, the officer admitted. I got back in, locked the doors, turned around, and we waited for the tow truck at the intersection of Copper Hill, well outside the canyon. You can call it superstition all you want. But when you spend enough time in those mountains, you learn that the ground holds on to things. Especially when those things were taken all at once. The science of anomalies. Skeptics and geologists have attempted to provide rational explanations for the strange occurrences along San Francisco Canyon Road. The area is highly active tectonically. The San Andreas Fault Zone runs just north of the canyon, and dozens of minor fault lines splinter through the Sierra Pelona Range. Dr. Eris Thorne, a retired geophysicist who conducted independent acoustic monitoring in the area in the early 2010s, suggests that the phenomenon may be tied to infrasound. The unique topography of the canyon, combined with the hollow ruins of the dam's remaining wing dike and the subterranean water channels, creates a natural acoustic chamber, Dr. Thorne explained. Under specific wind conditions, the canyon generates infrasound, sound waves below the frequency of human hearing, typically around 19 Hz. Infrasound has been scientifically proven to trigger physiological responses in humans, including a profound sense of inexplicable dread or paranoia, hyperventilation and sudden drops in body temperature, visual distortions, such as gray shapes or shadows in the peripheral vision, caused by the vibration of the human eyeball. Furthermore, Dr. Thorne notes that the high concentration of magnetite and quartz in the surrounding granitic rock can create localized electromagnetic anomalies during minor tectonic shifts. This could theoretically interfere with sensitive automotive electronics and digital odometers, mimicking a total electrical failure. But while science can explain the failing dashboards and the feelings of dread, it struggles to account for the physical evidence: the scratches on Marcus Vance's truck, the matching handprints on a police cruiser, or the terrifying consistency of the testimonies spanning nearly a century. Driving the canyon today. If you choose to drive San Francisco Canyon Road yourself, there are a few things to keep in mind. During the day, the road is beautiful, albeit stark. You can see the remaining chunks of the St. Francis Dam, massive, graffiti-covered blocks of ancient concrete that look like broken teeth sticking out of the canyon floor. The sun beats down on the scrub oak, and the area feels entirely mundane. But if you find yourself traversing the route after midnight, pay close attention to your vehicle. If your radio begins to stutter and slow down, or if the air inside your car suddenly turns cold enough to see your breath despite the summer heat, do not pull over. Do not pump your brakes if they feel stiff. Instead, maintain your momentum and keep your eyes locked firmly on the white lines of the asphalt directly in front of you. And above all, no matter what you see tumbling through the fog in your peripheral vision, and no matter what sounds clawing at your tailgate, do not look in your rearview mirror. Because the road through San Francisco Canyon isn't just a way to get from the valley to the desert. It is a monument to a night when the water came in the dark, and for some of the souls who were caught in its teeth, the flood has never stopped.